for TL versus TSM. That is our first review of the day. Everyone's eyes are dying. Sorry about that. But TL versus TSM. And just what that means and where we're at. We will be able to, once again, shout out our favorite stats website, gamesoflegends.com. I believe gol.gg is the latest kind of way the name has gone, so you can use that as well. I've thrown it up on the screen. We'll see how it looks. I got the ability to preview this all here. But as always, we want to talk about the region that we're in. Best part about North America, as always, is we can go onto that champion list, but we can do it the Who's That Pokemon way this time. You know, everyone knows who I love to check out. Every time we review the LCS, we need to know how our boy Olaf is doing. Now, Olaf priority around the world is a bit down, so he's a bit depressed as your boy Olaf, but we need to know how his win rate is doing in North America. North American Olaf. Remember, Brolaf, if you guys haven't seen it, you should go back and watch the YouTube video Riot released on the release of Brolaf, because that was, of course, a extension of the bro culture there. And there was a great video. Their then lawyer, I think, is the one who voiced Brolaf as well. So let's see how Olaf is doing in North America. He wasn't doing so hot. I'm going to be honest. He wasn't doing so hot before. So let's see if Olaf has picked up some moons. This is the final regular season. So I'm pretty confident that Olaf has really turned around his season. No, he hasn't. Brolaf apparently is no longer the life of the party. In fact, the party scene seems to be dead. He finished the entire season with no wins. None. 0 wins. 0-9. This champion, at worst, should be we pick some strong lanes and win more. And he just couldn't do it. Your boy Olaf he couldn't do it. And he is now the new NA Jace. Because actually, Jace, 8-8, he's doing pretty well. I feel like I want to vote out there. And I know this is like turning around years of history, but NA Jace, 47 bans. So, you know, like, he hasn't been able to rock up every time that he wanted to show up. He's been banned. And 16 picks, 50% win rate. I think NA Jace might need to be downgraded. Now, NA Jace LOL is a pretty long-standing meme, but I feel like we need some way to really convey what NA Olaf represents in the now and what NA Jace represents in the past. So, I don't know. I leave it to smarter people than I, whether you're using my emotes or playing around with some new emotes. Like, Jace is doing pretty good. Like, half the time he's popping. But NA Olaf is just somehow way worse. LS is the biggest happy person about this. He hates Olaf as a champion, famously, from the old days. But, yep, we got to have our visual look at things there. I felt the Casio was very front-loaded. Very high win rate. But I think Casio's a champ that I'd be surprised to see come back, even though on this graph it's big. NA Lucian also not doing that well, you know? NA Lucian struggling a little bit. It's a champion that I think teams have been having a lot less reliable wins with. You can't brainlessly pick Lucian anymore. And he was first picked by basically everyone, and a lot of great AD carries would just let worse teams play it and then just pick something like Ezreal or outscale it in lanes. So I don't think this necessarily means... I think the pick is still strong, but I think it's a reminder that you can't just pick Lucian and be okay. So, let's zoom in on our teams. We're going to start off with Team Liquid. We reviewed Team Liquid last week, if you remember. That was our review against FlyQuest, which was in a loss. And I know I came away from that VOD, which is on my YouTube channel, feeling really good about TL's early game. I thought they played a fantastic early game at shutting down Santorin and FlyQuest. And then they made some very big errors when it came to map resets. And from there, lost a winnable game. You know, it was a very interesting game, I found, and I liked their draft. I thought their early game was just like picture perfect. Like, it was one of those things where they played so well in the early game, to a point, and then we saw them over-prioritize ganking bot lane when it was the furthest away from Baron and getting nothing in an area where they had already taken the bot lane out of turret. And then Core JJ didn't have map pressure, and I believe before that, PapaSmithy didn't have map pressure top side on the Rex side and kind of fell away. So because of that, their mid-game transition was kind of where we saw them have some issues, but overall, I'm very impressed with their early game. However, they went 0-2 this last week. You know, they've had their struggles. Is it just we've booked our spot in at number 1, whatever? Like, is it just that we're trying things or we're just not caring as much, which is how a regular season can go? Or is it something more sinister or something more serious? That's what we're going to find out today, or at least have a second opinion. I want to give you guys educated opinions. If you donated to me and said, please ask me on this, I wouldn't have had, you know, a full answer to your question. So hopefully I'm going to have a more informed answer on your question. And then TSM, who we haven't reviewed in a while. I reviewed TSM C9 on my first VOD review stream, which is what, 3 weeks ago? So, you know, this is the 4th stream, so 3 weeks ago. And that match was already a couple of days out of date. So, you know, we haven't really reviewed them in 20 days. We've reviewed their only lost game in recent memory, if you were part of the chat on that day or watched it on YouTube. So where's TSM at is kind of the question here. And even though they lost that game against C9 from like a really awesome flank play from Licorice doing his best, the Shire impression on Aatrox, we had a lot to like about TSM in terms of their approach to the game. Like, they weren't going for scaling champs. They went for very early game draft, the Zoe Nico draft. And it wasn't perfect, but we came away being like, okay, TSM tried some things here and mostly knew what they were doing and made some big mistakes that are fixable. Their assignment at the end where Zoe Nico got collapsed on as the AD carry and 2 bodyguards in the bot lane weren't able to respond. Like, they tried to play 2 lanes. If you think of 3 lanes, like top, mid, bot, they were playing mid and bot, pushing with Baron that they had secured in a smart fashion, and then mid got collapsed on and bot couldn't be there and they lost. So I think TSM have in general looked pretty good. Like, they finally seem to have found some rhythm, which they haven't since they made the roster change that got everyone, you know, to be so upset around Doublelift and Biofrost being removed and all the other changes at the start of 2018. They're into a good rhythm now, and I hope this game will be indicative of that, or at least match the kind of good things I saw. So we came away from TL and TSM, both teams in losses, and said, okay, these teams have a lot to like about them. But now we're seeing them play each other, and that should be really interesting to look at. I want to look a bit at champion pools since the last time we watched them. For example, since the Nico, it's been a lot of Vladikali coming through from Broken Blade, sticking with the carry, sticking with the side lane pushing. Arcadian, he's playing largely utility tanks, but a couple of divers. Bjergsen, I think you can see his champion pool here. You know, he always picks whatever the scenario dictates, but I think more and more people are taking Lissandra where available, given that Lissandra in a lot of matchups is more than salvageable. It's something I'll talk about. I'm sure we'll see some Lissandra today. And then Sven and Smoothie doing their thing in the bot lane. So at the end of the day, I think TSM have kind of started to work out where they're at and being able to play around pressure. TL, they still play pretty standard stuff, but Impact's champion pool has been a bit more Kennen dominated in recent memory. I was really enjoying watching, I think it was Sino Dragons yesterday. It might have been Victory 5. I think Sino Dragons against RNG, bringing back the Scion. So I'm actually optimistic, which sounds like a weird word when it's a top lane tank, but I think Scion could be up there again in the top lane meta. Obviously, a lot of these picks are going to be older ones. TL play very strong, smart early game League of Legends normally. So let's put 2 and 2 together and see how this one goes. Now, this doesn't end up being a super long game. Like, this is not a 50-minute like ARAM fest as far as I'm aware. So let's see if there's a dominant style here that plays out between TL and TSM. So we can go full screen. Hooray for that. Sorry that my webcam does cover champions. I'll talk about them on the left. I just don't really want to move my webcam left and right. It makes more sense for the game overlay, so apologies for that one. I actually need to keep my cheat sheet open for commands, as I'm trying not to use the mouse too much on these reviews. But finally, ready to get into the Team Liquid vs TSM review. TSM 12-5, but coming in hot. Liquid, you know, they're already secure, so understandably moving a bit slower. I think audio's in a pretty good spot. Let's see if my buttons work. Moving forward and backwards, increasing and decreasing speed. Trying to remember. So, opening up here. So, notable things to talk about this week. We're on patch 9.5, so same as last week. But big note here, of course, is that Silas is enabled in this region in North America. Wasn't enabled in Korea, so we didn't get to see Silas warp drafts. We just had first pick Lissandra every game, but then Silas has kind of come in and thrown a wrench in that at this point. So the Silas coming in, I think, is pretty relevant. Red side bans getting clogged. I have a very big expectation that 9.6, which should be the playoff patch in, I guess, every region, it feels like red side bans are very clogged. So I think blue side will evolve to be the side that everyone picks, which, especially given that every region has side selection when it comes to playoffs compared to LCK where we have fixed sides. You know, twice on the blue in the first round robin means you're twice on the blue side, twice on the red side in the second round robin. I think blue side right now, I feel like Jace has to be banned, Lissandra has to be banned, Silas has to be banned. All those champions are first pickable with almost no answer. And then Urgot also arguably needs to be banned. Urgot jungle top is a very interesting flex that's very popular right now in Korea when it comes to solo queue. And I feel like competitive play, even though Urgot is a much more damage-focused champion early, you just get your fat stack of warrior, you add a black cleaver to it, and you can really do a lot of dirty things. So I feel like blue side is going to be the god tier when it comes to playoffs. I'd be surprised to see red side, even with its counter-picking options, prove to be strong. But let's zoom in. It's still 9.5 here, so Silas, again, is a champion that is so flexible. Even though teams didn't really know how to win with it originally, I feel like it's maturing as a champion and players are getting much smarter at playing with it. And it kind of was an interesting champ where players were better at playing against it than with it when we saw it in the meta when it was just released. And now I think everyone kind of understands what Silas does, and people are getting more power out of the very obviously like packed kit, let's say. Overtuned is a strong word, but packed kit. So first pick Tahm Kench is, it feels like a very Smoothie versus Core JJ thing. Smoothie's had a long period of his career where he picked a lot of Tahm Kench. Core JJ is a Tahm Kench aficionado. But it's one of those things where if you're an LCS viewer and you sell me on Core JJ's Tahm Kench is one of the big reasons that he's an MVP candidate and he uses it better than other NA supports, I would agree with you. But that doesn't mean it should be a first pick champion. I don't think you can get away with first pick Tahm Kench lanes like Ezreal Tahm Kench and not lose a lot in draft on the blue side. So maybe that's what they're afraid of here, is it's going to be a red side duo of picks. But yeah, I'm not sold on Tahm Kench first pick because it doesn't, it doesn't win 2v2. It doesn't really do much in the early game. It curtails a couple of strategies like the power of pick, but you already banned Lissandra Rise on blue, so you get a comfort for one person and a style that you no doubt would have scrimmed for, but when it comes to an arms race, which is what I think about with draft, I don't really, it doesn't really inspire me. And then Broken Blade doing some BMing here with some of his hovers. Jack's first pick would have been, Jack's first pick is not something you expect. It is a jungle top flex at the highest level, but it wasn't a realistic one here. So you just take Braum, and like Braum into a Tahm Kench is just whatever, right? It's pretty much a farm lane. Braum Lucian is claimed, and this is the cost you make for first picking Tahm Kench is the enemy gets Braum Lucian, and there's no Tahm Kench duo that slams Braum Lucian. Like, you can probably salvage a farming bot laner like a Vayne better because you have the Tahm Kench, and maybe you just were married to crit 80 carries in this game. You can take Ezreal and kind of farm it out. And then if you get out of bot lane, you can obviously rotate better, but this is why I struggle with first pick Tahm Kench as a strategy. Lucian Braum, so they want lane priority. That part is clear. Now, Varus is the one AD carry we don't see a lot that actually has a very good matchup into Lucian Braum. So, okay, if you're going to go 2v2 focused or have 2v2 options, I don't mind this from TL. I think in this meta, Varus can be very difficult to run unless you want to go Comet Varus, which amusingly is what Sven was running last time we reviewed TSM. And then Rek'Sai banned, Jarvan taken. I mean, it's hard crowd control, as amusingly, Ziggs has a very funny face in this pause. But, alright, so TL have very hard CC. There will be times where they have priority bot lane without jungle assistance, so with the formation of first pick Tahm Kench, I think they went the best way they possibly could on this draft, so shout out to them. Beardson, final pick on the red side. We'll see if they claim something that you can double ban and extend a lead on here. That's my favorite thing to do, is to take a solo laner and then get coverage bans for it. Beardson is, of course, potentially the Akali player here, but with Broken Blade on the lineup, very real that both of them could be playing it. Lysandra already taken away. That was one of the answers in the past against the Lysandra. Interesting ban. GP ban against Impact. Now, it's one of Impact's carry champions. It's something that can... We've seen LCK teams pick it into Akali, but not work out. If you go Steric's second item, you can kind of be fine. GP, for me, is a ban that says you want Impact to farm out and then ult bot lane, and with Chains of Corruption and a Jarvan, we're just going to gank bot lane a million times. And then if Lucian Braum are behind, their short effective range means they can't bully. So this to me is an insurance to allow the bullying to work better in bot. And then we'll see what the bans are here. So jungle bans on Acadian. We noticed this pool. He's played Sejuani recently, so you can kind of understand that. So they're saying Impact playing top lane Jarvan. Or they want Impact playing top lane Jarvan. Interesting. Sejuani's solo lane was obviously played in EU by Wunder and in solo queue by Caps, but I don't think that's something they're really thinking about here. LeBlanc coverage ban, that's a coverage ban for mid lane. So it's basically saying we want to keep the Akali flex going, and we didn't want to have the ability to ult bot lane for the GP. So that's pretty much the look they're going for there. We're seeing what TSM want to push forward with here. You're going to almost always just pick jungle at this pick to extend a flex. And here we go. Okay, so Kindred jungle taken. I think Kindred jungle is same theory behind an old C9 favorite against jungle Jarvan, or just as Jarvan as a champion. If you guys weren't aware, in 2016 Worlds, C9 at the time, 2017 Worlds I should say, Reaper's, I guess I should say contracts, but Reaper's counterpick for the Jarvan meta at that tournament was Graves and his ability to just quick draw out of the EQ, and in general be slippery enough that Jarvan's ult and CC threat wasn't that threatening onto him. And I think Kindred is the same kind of approach here. So very much, very high tempo draft. You need Lucian Braum to be able to overextend, which makes sense for the GP ban. You want to get a good lane for Akali, so that's already very standard on the LeBlanc ban. So I like high tempo drafts. I'm a big fan. I'm a big believer that playing aggressively is the way to go when it comes to this particular meta. So I'm liking Acadian's pick here when it comes to the Kindred. And Team Liquid, once again, they probably want to square up this draft. They want Varus Tahm Kench. So you know they want to play a super ordered game. So something like Kindred's annoying, right? Because It can gank super hard early. It can come from different directions. If you can reduce Kindred to her essence, which is squishy ranged champion that wants to choose her time to in a team fight, then yes, you can do a lot with Varus, Tahm Kench, Jarvan. But if the game gets chaotic, those are champions that Kindred can feast on. So it's kind of an awkward spot there. Let's see how TL want to close out the draft. We think they're going to take solo lanes here. That would be the most expected thing. So they're facing an Akali somewhere, so you don't want to pick anything that gets slammed by Akali. And the blind pick has to come in somewhere. And they're going to probably blind pick Ahri here. So they pick a team comp that wants to team fight. They could have gone a lot of different ways because you already have the ability to go team fight on the Varus if you go for the lethal tempo, or go for Comet for laning plays. And Comet would also be the better champion to sit in mid lane and just wave clear. And then lethal tempo would be the team fight choice. Then you pick 2 team fight champs. So you're saying, okay, we want a team fight. Neither of these champions can do anything in the mid game. Early mid game, I should say. Luden's one item, Orianna, is fine, but like not super devastating. The Vladimir, as we know, needs the CDR and time. But bridging to the point where these champions are strong against the enemy draft that has Akali Kindred is actually really tricky. So it's almost on the left side of the screen, kind of an ordered comp where you're really about slowly approaching a team fight with your right scenario. And then TSM have a pretty chaos comp going on here with how much they can do before the timings are done for the side of TSM. And how are we going to round out the draft? There's not really any reason to go into team fights against the enemy team because you know eventually you will lose. So you want to play early, and they bring it back, baby. Zillion, Kindred. A lot of C9 flavor about this. I really like this TSM approach. This is the sort of draft that wins the game before TL can hit their timings, and it can subvert some of the strong points like Varus 2-item spike. Because it's like, you got Ahri, who's probably got the best 1-item spike here. You could arguably the Ruin King Varus, but it's probably 1-item Ahri and the Ludens into 2-item Varus with the Rage Bait into 3-4-item Vlad, which can all just be completely thrown off by a lot of immediate gold injected to the side of TSM and just an aggressive playstyle, getting item leads that aren't kind of fully understood and just the on the papers there. So I feel like TL has the on the paper, slow and steady, wins the race draft, and TSM has the much more new age Invictus Gaming inspired, take the game by the scruff of the neck draft. I'm biased towards the TSM draft. Consistently, it's what I've liked, but I think TL is doing what TL does. They want to square up games. Again, I always come back, and it's me ascribing a lot to one single comment, but I always come back to Double If saying, I hate the Mountain Drake. Remove it from pro games. It's too overpowered. And I say, given how TL play, ordered games, very Gen G inspired, call JJ there. They want to play slow and steady, take almost no risks, and just win because they have great players and because on paper their strategy is really good. Yes. But Mountain Drake is the thing that makes those plans harder because Mountain Drake is X percentage faster taking the objectives that your team will usually be first to set up around. But if you lost a couple of Mountain Drakes, you probably don't have map control unless you've already won the game, which can happen. And thus, from behind, wanting to hit things in a very practiced fashion, Mountain Drake is the hardest thing to remember because you're only within an estimation of the amount of time of when to actually get to the fight and be able to contest an objective. So the fact that Mountain Drake throws in the most unknowns, rather than that champion is 10% stronger because they get 10% more AD and AP, it's that Drake, which looking at their champions might be this much-ish amount of time taken, is now X percentage faster, is way harder and much more chaos. Control versus chaos feels like TL versus TSM style, and it's sort of thing where TL would want to be tested on. Like, win, lose, or draw, this is the sort of draft that TL want to be practicing against, because this is the way I think teams will approach them in a best of 5. So it's good practice for sure. Seeing memes in the chat about impact on Vlad. Understandable. His carry play obviously is not the thing that he's prized for. The Vlad Akali matchup is an interesting one. I think Vlad is going to take his time and play defensively, and Akali should be able to shove for the majority of the laning phase. I think where it goes 2-3 items is something I haven't seen with the heal removed. So I'm guessing Vlad wins the side trades earlier than before. Before it was actually really late. I think Vlad was in a really good spot. So Akali was in a really good spot against Vlad against most of the game. I think you always, with gank assist, can do cool things on Akali, but I'll be honest, you know, I don't see a lot of Akali in solo queue, and I talked to some pros, and like it feels like a lot of her strength was rebuffed in terms of team fighting. I don't think it actually helps her that much in side lanes, because Vlad has a lot of AoE, right? It can hit her with Tides of Blood. So my guess is that Vlad is a bit happier as the matchup goes on, but early game priority, I think, goes to the side of the Akali. Jungle pathing here. Blue buff, red buff, Krugs here actually is the take for... let's watch the star here. I wasn't paying close attention to it, so let's go back. Yeah. So both teams starting bot side here. Even though I guess Tom Kench makes bot lane an unattractive lane to gank, I think a lot of the play is going to be with the jungler as the mid lane goes on, but I think the interesting spot is where top lane is, around 3.5 minutes in terms of how pushed it is on one side or the other, and potential counter gank here from Kindred. Kindred gets a low roll on the spawning of the scuttle crabs. When it comes to the RNG here, you really want to be able to fight for the scuttle that is marked, but the marked scuttle's bot side. Neither goes there, so it ends up being blue-red, and then for Jarvan, he just goes straight to scuttle's secondary camp, so this ends up being a thing here. Very interesting pathing from Kindred going for the Krugs here, right? It'll give level 3. And I guess Kindred's level 3 is pretty powerful, but it wasn't necessarily something I would have expected when it comes to jungle pathing. And a Kindred throwing things off is always pretty cool. Kindred can be very predictable because the enemy has a global taunt, you know? They know this jungler has a lot of incentive to go to this place, but just watching here, no early ganks. Kind of a little bit surprising to see PapaSmithy not gank, because he went red into Scuttle, and then I guess the theory is you expect to be spotted on a Scuttle ward, but if you can get a Zillion flash before the first combination with the Kindred, that can be really huge. You can do a lot of big things if you can set Zillion back, because if Zillion can't overextend to double bomb and is thinking about his life, he actually kind of struggles to do much without his jungler. And they still get the Mark Scuttle, so even though it wasn't the natural place to path to, he actually gets an uncontested first Scuttle, and Smithy is late in contesting it. So it's not going to be as easy and trivial this game for TL to get the lane control they had in the previous game we reviewed. Last week, remember, they had strong lanes and they had Rek'Sai as well, just dictating to the enemy jungler. The moment it's Jarvan versus Kindred, you can't play like it's Rek'Sai versus Lee Sin. Like, you can't play disrespectfully because Kindred outtrades you in damage very heavily, and Zillion is going to respond first. So important to note that without a very extended level 1 plan, there's no real way for PapaSmithy to control the tempo of the enemy jungler, and that means that Kindred is an unknown. And that's scary, especially as Zillion gets closer to 6 and turret dives and really aggressive moves. Like, think about even nerfed Akali, Kindred Zillion roaming topside. Like, Vlad, one of the hardest champions to gank post level 2-3, is going to be in a bit of a struggle to get away from that. Almost no one can repel Zillion turret dives, and that's before you include Lamb's Respite, Chrono Shift, and all the things that are there. So, a lot to like about where this game can go, but TSM have to play aggressive, right? They know the late game. Like, this game reaches a point where Vlad hard counters most of TSM's lineup. I'm looking at mostly Kindred, Zillion, Lucian, because all those champions are pretty mid-ranged, and Zillion's struggle was always someone getting in his face and forcing him to use Chrono Shift on someone behind the times, i.e., I want to keep this Chrono Shift for this champion. Oh crap, now I'm being dived on. I have to Chrono Shift myself. If you make Zilean Chrono Shift himself, it's usually a good thing for your team. Lamb's Respite. Yes, you're not going to die to the AoE pop, but you see Lamb's Respite, you put down Hemoplague, they're all coming out on 20 HP, right? So at the end of the day, like, AoE threat here from Vlad is such a big outscale way. But TSM should have many ways to play out early to mid game well, and we already saw they can do that to some degree with, on the whole, good performance against C9 in the early game. Caden's first gank, spots in the mid lane, nothing going to happen there. Caden gets moved on to here. This is really nicely done by Smithy. He actually finds a window. Let's watch this one again. So what happens here? So not spotted at all, but Acadian is kiting top side, just face checks, and really good window. Like, the amount of windows where this happens, I consider where we're at beforehand. Bjergsen has low mana. So the call here is Acadian's not coming to get a kill. He'll take a summoner if he can get it, but this is very much Bjergsen saying, I want to back and buy double Dark Seal, or, you know, finish up his first building piece. I'm not sure what he builds into on Zilean. Rod of Ages is a possibility, double Dark Seal. When he start corrupting, and almost every mid laner will go corrupting now. This is a pressure gank into forcing a good recall timing for Bjergsen before he runs out of mana. So Acadian comes in. Yeah, that's what the big thing here is about getting control. But it seems like they abandoned that halfway through. It's kind of strange given that Bjergsen like can chug a corrupting potion and maybe get one more wave to shove. So it ends up being more of a gank than you would have respected given the scenario of cleanse flash on Ori. And they don't get that recall time. I mean, Acadian sticks around maybe to go for a gank from behind Orianna. Hard to say what he's pathing to here. Scuttle hasn't spawned. And now Bjergsen, who didn't go for a recall and didn't actually shove the wave, is going to actually be second to a skirmish. How often does this happen? Where a skirmish happens, how many units is this? 1,000 units from mid lane? And Zilean's going to get there second, because Zilean wasted all of his mana on like a very unrealistic gank that wasn't going to lead to anything. They don't get the shove that, to me, should have been the primary objective. And now, actually, Smithy is in a really nice spot to get a burst. They follow Flash here, and I think with the follow Flash, I could take or leave. Like, I don't think follow Flash was smart there, but they were going to get out-roamed by Orianna. Like, it's not trivial that TL found a moment like that. So it's good capitalization by TL, and I think TSM were kind of muddied about how they played that Kindred play. And now Kindred doesn't have Flash, which pre-6 is not ideal. Ooh, but we move forward from here. Looking at the lanes, Vlad's going CS with Akali. Again, our thought is around level 9 that Akali will have some nice true shove, and I think Vlad will still be taking time, but CS for CS you love. Ori going CS for CS with Zilean is not surprising. Should be a farm lane for Orianna. And then bot lane, we talked about how Varus Tom Kench was the one way to actually find some good trade patterns against. It is Lethal Tempo from Doublelift, so it's much more team fight from him than the Comet Varus that we saw from Sven when we reviewed TSM C9 a few weeks ago. So the jungle advantage is the biggest one. The jungle's just traded flashes, and Kindred doesn't have multiple marks or, CS advantage. So that's pretty damn good when you think about it for the side of TL. I think TL is very happy with how the first 6 minutes have gone, given their scaling. Watching Kindred, because Kindred's usually the one that I think it allows, like, as a caster, you always want to have your eyes on where you think the swing will happen. If there is, say, for example, a skill matchup about to hit into a point, like, let's think of Aurelia versus Rumble hitting level 4-5 in Season 2. That was the lane you wanted to watch. In this game, you look at what's explored, and to me, it's like, what are the unknowns? Like, you kind of know that everyone's farming, and that Kindred's the aggressive jungler and Jarvan is more counter-ganking and being in position to relieve pressure. So because of that, and the fact that TSM has the onus on early game aggression, you kind of want to just spend most of your minimap, if you want to know where the action's going to happen, seeing what Kindred's up to. Because Kindred should be the source of the action, good or bad. And you expect Zillion to be on the same screen as the Kindred from a point, and we've pretty much reached that point. Chrono Shift available. Acadian 1.5 camps away from level 6 himself. Onus of execution, early power spikes, aggressive intent should be on TSM's side. So for now, we're farming it out, but that's where my eyes are drawn to for sure. Broken Blade laning well. Had a bit of a laning mistake we saw in the 1v1 against Licorice last time out. Like, I don't think he got the maximum out of the Nico versus Aatrox matchup by any means. So, waiting to see how he does here. He's been leveling up as a player. Still don't have a full opinion on him. He had a really high rating among EU teams. Some people... I talked about this in my YouTube about 2019, my 2019 plans, but for a long time, my second consideration of what to do this year was to be head coach of Origin. So I was involved in some of the early talks about what sort of a roster should Origin be looking at and things like that. And I know that Broken Blade was a player that was very, very highly rated by talent scouts around EU. Obviously, already had some pro play in the TCL in 2018, but he's a player that was very, very coveted. And there were the whispers that he had gone over to TSM, pretty early in the piece, but no one really knew his full status until that was all confirmed. I know that Broken Blade was super hyped as a top laner, so I know he's not necessarily grown into his britches just yet, like he's got work to do, but from reviewing him, like he looked like a very obvious talent coming into 2019, and he's not the finished product by any means, but if you already have Bjergsen and Sven and Smoothie, like maybe there's a lot of validity to having a player who's a pro scene rookie. Like he had played in TCL, but given how definitions work, that's considered a lower tier than LEC or EU LCS at the time. So I think Broken Blade is a talent, is a laning talent that made a lot of sense for TSM to look into, and I don't think I'm going to judge him as the finished article just yet. Like I think he's got parts of his game he needs to work on for sure. Reminds me of Nuguri at times. But yeah, I just wanted to confirm that like this is a player that it's not like they just got a random EU top player. This is a player that was super coveted. So we're looking on him to be able to play matchups like this, his bread and butter, really well. Given the scenario of the meta that you expected coming in 2019 and a top laner, wanting someone who speaks first language English and needing to import, Broken Blade made a hell of a lot of sense. Like there wasn't many more eligible top laners that were available in the 2019 offseason for TSM. So we're watching, and honestly, it's level 6s on mid and top. Now, as TL, you're going to get a Drake here after the spot topside. That's a pretty good objective. Your secondary objective between spawns of things like Rift Herald and Drake is try to maintain vision left and right of mid. You need to spot Zillion's roam as early as possible, because otherwise your side lanes are going to struggle. That is the most exploitable, but even Varus, Tom, Kench, there's going to be windows that you can do things on them there. So because of that, they need to be focusing on that. Again, understandable that right now Smithy is just taking Drake, but that's what I'm going to be looking for is TL's defensive vision, because your vision line and where it is so important. They come top side. Impact knew that he should be there. Let's watch the information available here. So let's watch the play. Smithy is already on Drake as this happens. 8 minutes 40 is the timer. So 8 minutes 40. We're watching the play. Obviously, Impact very, very aware that he's topside. The chances of Impact getting any help is exactly 0. He's got a cleanse mid laner against TP Zillion. Acadian can turret dive. He's got, of course, his ult. And there's Shroud that, okay, doesn't work on turrets, but still gives you a lot of diving options on the top side. You can zone space for so long. The turret dive here is the most obvious. And he's had 20 seconds to think about it. This is the moment where he fully knows Acadian's coming for the dive now. Watch how Impact plays this. Just watch it a bit slower. So when do you pull is always the question. I think he really wants phase rush. I think he gets it so late. So my guess is that he really is looking for a phase rush proc. I'm not sure of the cooldown on phase rush as this starts. Because phase rush with pull can actually disengage you super, super far, right? And there's a lot of slows between Akali and Kindred. He takes all of the damage. The moment he starts disengaging damage, he's got turret shots to play around, but I mean, Arcadian plays this well, and I think Impact... It's a very awkward spot, because do you kite towards the person who's going to do 200 damage and kill you, or do you kite towards the turret? The answer is neither. Broken Blade takes the E. It just ends up being too easy. Like, there's no obvious outplay available here for Impact. The outplay is to not be there, and Impact usually has really good top lane sense, but I think that's pretty rough from him. Like, he had the information 20 to 25 seconds before and went down, so... Given that no one was coming and no one could come, like, remember, the only person that can pack up and join on the map is the enemy Zillion. They pull this off without even needing to employ the Zillion, and that means that right now, if you're Impact, your call is, now I really, really need defensive vision on the left side of mid lane. Otherwise, Zillion roams up, but I'm done. Like, there's double control ward there, as we know from TSM, but that didn't even require the mid laner to have the push going on. And yet they still pull off the kill. So now your Vlad is like, yes, he didn't use a summoner, but he's going to be pretty at his wit's end about this scenario. And he's the person who's going to take the longest to turn on. And if you farm it out normally, maybe you have your items to have threat at 32 minutes. If it becomes 40 minutes, more often than not, the game's over by then, right? So going to be a transfer of power here. Arcadian going bot lane. He knows that the enemy has control wards in the river, so he can't take a river access. He didn't have to use a summon on this play, but Lamb's Respite is on cooldown. He's just looking to see what happens outside, and whether he wants to reclaim control, or whether he's trying to proactively gank. It's hard to know. Tahm Kench isn't in lane. This is the point in the game where Akali should beat Vlad by the most significant margin. Vlad has... CDR towards 45% CDR, doesn't have level 10 yet, so if he had Transcendence not cashed in, he's got the Inspiration Tree, so almost certainly has the 5% there, so regardless, will not have that much CDR now. I'm guessing he's at about 20% from item, 25, probably 31% CDR, maybe 29% CDR, as a scaling CDR goes up from here, but Akali has one item Gunblade and level 9, so she's really strong. At this point, and that needs to be remembered. So just given the golf and items, Akali doesn't need help to have a lot of presence bot lane, the top lane. Let's watch this play on the minimap. So what's happened here? What has been revealed? Kindred jumps in. She's waiting over the wall, so she's not actually spot on the first control ward, but I believe is spot on the second. So bot lane now knows they're under quite a lot of threat. So it's just a 1-for-1, and they get the flash on Arcadian, so it's not actually that bad. Watching the mini-maps situation here, the moment the vision starts being contested, you see the on-the-way pings, Jarvan just starts running down. So Jarvan's, of course, entering the right way that he should be to try to help this vision contest. Orianna can't leave lane, because Zillion's going to be very good at keeping her around. Smithy goes mid first, I guess thinking about catching Zillion in transition, doesn't go straight bot. I think because it's Kindred, you might say, okay, maybe going straight bot is the right move, but it's definitely not a brain dead move or anything like that. Like, you understand why he pathed the way he did. It's a very difficult duo to take down, and it just ends up being a 1-for-1, which I think is fine given this scenario. It could have been a bit cleaner. Spawn onto the scuttle here is an important one. This would be second stack if they're able to pick it up. But it's overall, like, it's kind of a budget negative move because, yes, TSM needs to be making trade-ups because they feel like they're going to be heavily outscaled this game. But Akali should be able to solo manufacture a lead because that's the lane they got the advantage in. And it's a point of power for her with the Gunblade. So going bot side and taking away summoner spells and trading 1-for-1, but getting some river control while Akali wins because of where your first gank is kind of the... It's like power neutral because you're claiming new terrain to fight around, +1 or 2 because you're already set up topside to succeed. So I think overall it's still pretty good news for the side of TSM, who, again, we're focusing on because they have the aggressive expectation. They're the ones that need to push up and get a lead with the draft they have. They have turret plate mid, they have 2 turret plates top. They've lost a turret plate bot lane. CoreJJ is pretty far up the lane here. So that's like a bit of a solo mistake. I think if he's less far up the lane, he probably lives. So I guess the biggest criticism we can give is that if CoreJJ is that far up the lane, I'll show you where he is. It's like the play starts with him like pretty far up. Like there's nothing for him there. There's no minion wave there. He's not going to run at Sven and kill him. While Smithy was pathing towards mid. I feel like if communication is perfect, for CoreJJ to be that far up, Smithy should be running straight bot. So that's like the small criticism we can say about positioning in the 1-for-1. And like we were saying, Broken Blade is in the Bazinga moment where you can just solo grow the lead. So you don't even need control wards topside. Orianna with Cleanse isn't roaming here. Broken Blade is going to be open up a lead, and there's nothing you can do. If that's 2 levels under and has sucky items in comparison, like this is way more Akali favored right now than even it suggests. Like you see 38 CS at 12 minutes, and you're like, oh, Akali looks good. But knowing Gunblade versus building block items and 2 level lead that only now becomes 1, it's thousands and thousands of gold and even more in terms of effective stats between the 2. Never got those coverage wards, did impact. And it's kind of a... If this is going to become a lull impact game, which I'm not aware of, but it's drafted Vlad into a hard matchup and no jungle resources at all. Not even mid lane control ward resources. Like, the dive was so obvious with the comp the enemy had, and did Impact play it that well in the turret dive? No. But he got turret dive by a turret dive comp and then got no wards or ganks. So, I mean, of course you lose, right? TL got to play aggressive around bot. They got a Drake around bot as a trade for the kill, but we'll see if that actually has any big impact on how the game is being played out. TSM should have control of Rift Herald because their top side control, whether you have wards down or not, is Akali being able to roam versus Vlad being able to roam at these item timings. Impact gets a ward down and he's going to like have to sacrifice a lot just to do that. I don't know if there's actually kill pressure on him. No, there isn't. Need heal reduction there, I guess, to get the kill. But they don't care about the ward. They're going to be able to make a trade of the map, and you feel really good about the Drake spawn here. The Cloud doesn't really play into TL's win condition because they got a scaling draft. Like, if this is double Infernal, then maybe TSM has to adjust their game plan. So how does this play start? So mid goes on a back timing here. We know there's a ward behind them. Is he spotted recalling? I want to say he's spotted recalling here. Ah, okay. This is a really smart play by TSM, or a really good shot call. Let's talk about how this happens. So Drake is being taken. We're watching the minimap here for people at home. And then Zilean doesn't have to recall now. So watch this play. When did Zilean last shot? So Zilean last shopped recently. Notice this timing, 13 minutes 28, coming from base. Remember that timer, 13 minutes 28. Comes to mid lane, you know, faffs around. It's been 20 seconds. Blah, blah, blah. So remember he shopped 40 seconds ago. The trade happens. You go bot lane trying to get the Rift Herald. That's going to happen. You know the enemy team's going to take Drake. That's going to happen as well. That's going to be the trade, just like the time you tried a turret dive, and now there's going to be a trade of objectives. It's now less than a minute since the recall from Bjergsen. Bjergsen walks up, confirms that the Rift Herald is going to be started, and watches play. He clears out a wave and starts backing again. Remember, he just backed a minute ago. The reason why they make this play is that they're fishing for something. Zilean goes into the sidebar, starts to recall, and the red question mark ping here is a really big one. The red question mark ping is because, as we got the confirmation of, let's look for it here, fast forwarding. So we had the confirmation of it a second ago, but what I want to show you guys is that the red question mark ping there, because of the control ward that's down, they see Jarvan backing. So usually you would never, after 1 minute, back and go for a dive or go for a gank on a duo lane bot lane, because Jarvan just showed he was bot side. But he showed on vision when he was clearing this ward, and when he was backing, sorry, and not when he finished the Drake, so they know it's going to be outnumbered. This is a really smart shot call here from TSM. I imagine from Bjergsen or Core JJ around bot lane, the vision play here is really smart. That there's no way Jarvan can be there. They see him backing, so they go for the early recall, the proactive TP play. We know that Jensen's on cleanse to answer when it comes to the pressure. But this timing here is really, really big. Really well done from TSM. Really smart in terms of this shot calling here. Either Core JJ or Bjergsen made this call. Bjergsen was already on a recall, a suspicious recall, so I would imagine it was Bjergsen led. But finding a spot like that is the right mindset. If you're going to play a draft like this and miss moments like that, which we'll miss in VOD reviews of other teams, and then you don't get some kills on the bot side, you don't get a punish, you just get outscaled, right? Because in this game, we know that everyone comes to work, pops in their, you know, their time card, and goes home and does that for 40 minutes. TL just press their buttons and win. That's just Vladimir Orianna as a duo. However, we also know that TL is going to be a bit sleepy in the early game. They didn't get their caffeine fix. They need time to scale into the day. And TSM have the tools to be proactive and were proactive. The onus is on you when you draft like TSM did with the Zilean, and they've shown they're up to the task. So really nicely done by TSM on that bot lane pincer play. The gank coming in from Bjergsen. Really good communication. And now TL, you know, they're in that awkward spot where double his flash is down. Bot side, top side control has been gone for ages. Bot side control, they've established, but they're kind of bluffing a bit, you know. And when you have the scaling draft, you're a bit bashing your chest and saying, hey, don't you dare, we got people here. But that only means so much. It's a bit of a ruse. And, you know, you're at a point in the game where TSM know that TL has more members than them in the river because they went and put down vision there. And they maybe should think about that. But every other contingent about the game is on TSM's side. Top side doesn't need wards to let you know that if Kindred or Zilean isn't showing, holy crap, they might be diving Vladimir. The lane trades are going just fine for TSM as well, because Jensen is going to be pushing and backing, where Zilean can do a lot of little things with roaming. So a lot of the game state here, apart from what TL is shouting about, i.e. bot river control, is TSM controlled. So TSM have a lot of options, and TL really can only be the sum of their defensive vision. We've been calling for that defensive vision top side, still not there. Vlad has never got a control ward on the top side after the clearing out that happened around Rift Herald. There's no control. No one is interested. Smithy's trying to play bot side, but you know, he is kind of firefighter Jarvan in this game, trying to put out both side lanes now after the duo lane. And this is what happens in games like this when you draft Vlad and you have a top lane that you don't play around. Is, you know, he got his wards at one point, as they said in the review no doubt weeks ago. He got his wards at one point. They were cleared out, but then bot lane got ganked, and they picked to win 2v2 and were winning 2v2. And now the big voices, Core JJ, Double Lift, is saying, I need, come on, Smithy, like, clear out this wards. I need some vision around here. We can't push out, and then we have no pressure anywhere. And you're not wrong. That is true. However, then Jarvan's bot side and revealing himself bot side, and then top side has even less than he had before, right? Now there's nothing happening top side for the side of TL, and that's kind of the issue here is if you're going to draft like that, then the person who needs some help top side isn't going to get help anymore, and the duo lane who now needs help because they were ganked is going to monopolize all the jungle time, and then it's just you're gonna get the worst of all worlds, right? He has 4,700 gold at 17 minutes, 119 CS. For context, the enemy jungler has 800 gold more than him. Even more worrying, his own jungler has 200 more gold than him. That's, you know, this Vlad needs 8,000 gold to be relevant. Like, and some Vlads get that 8,000 gold with Klepto and some jungle help, or with some splitting of the map that makes sense. But instead, this Vlad is just going to be a 10% damage amp until 40 minutes. Like, you know? Like, he runs at you and you're like, sorry, like, you're not even a vampire, you're a hemo man, so what the hell is that? And you just ignore him, right? Garlic is super effective against this guy, so this is something they've decided to do in terms of draft, and then one thing went away from the bot lane, and now the bot lane is going to monopolize resources, and now Vlad's just a bit sad at this point. So top side is like open in terms of pressure. They got the Rift Herald, as we know, and then TSM, we said, it does really well in almost every other scenario. They're able to push up. They now know that TL has to respond to a mid lane push, so all that work TL put into controlling the river, that's over. They're just going to rush through there and take that over. And now, where is TL strong? They can't really enter top side of the map. Bot side of the map, they've got a shallow defensive line, nothing really doing there. They don't have Varus, Tahm Kench in the mid lane, and this is another problem. Tahm Kench draws Ezreal, Tahm Kench, Varus, Tahm Kench. They want a side lane turret down, and then to go mid lane and threaten Rotato plays. Instead, they're still farming in a 2v2 with no map control anywhere else, and the enemy has a TP advantage at almost all times because Zillion and Akali. This is actually the game state where it doesn't matter how much vision you had, Double Lift and Core JJ can eventually be collapsed on by 5 people. It's just what happens there. Broken Blade keeps pushing up. Like, if you point into the camps that TL control for sure, it's very little that TSM aren't happy just to give to the enemies. So this is a really, really strong point for TSM. They've been able to hit the ground running as they needed to. And now, you know, there's no easy way to just be like, let's fix this problem, because you need so many more resources to equalize scenarios than TSM need to tilt scenarios. And what I mean by that is TSM walk up to an unwarded brush, put down a ward, or just go out of vision, and the enemy needs 2 people to chase 1 person. Kindred goes topside, and you're like, Jarvan kind of needs the Orianna shield and to E every brush off cooldown to get vision, because he's scared of dying to double bomb and a Kindred coming out. Like, you need way more to get an even kind of pressure situation, because the enemy drafted for early pressure. And there's more and more moments like this where bot lane no longer wants to be in that 2v2, like we mentioned. They can't go mid lane because they want to actually group with the Vladimir, who can't enter lane without help, and that means that TSM just easily take down an outer turret. They take down the mid lane turret, 2-for-1 special. TL gets something, but amusingly, Vladimir isn't going to get any of that gold, so they're not even grouping with him. Some teams would group there to a point, then try and escort the duo lane to mid lane and allow Vlad to get solo gold, catch up. Nope. Vlad is not getting anything this game. Welfare Vladimir. Or if you're an Australian, Centrelink Vladimir. And Centrelink Vladimir, no. No, 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 no. That's not how you play Vladimir. Nice counter kill here. TSM's super bold trying to make this play. Let's see how clean it ends up being overall. Alright. Good play by TL. Let's watch how this one had started. So let's talk about what's happening here. So Kindred takes bot side Drake. First Drake of the game for TSM. Obviously not going to be at this fight. Vladimir can teleport. Lucian can walk. So Broken Blade, I think his first poke is fine. Because remember, this is with the minimap on. 2 strong members. It's 2-0-1. Core items done. Lucian and Kindred. You know, Kindred went for Bloodrazor over Warrior. So at this point, extended trades, she's stronger. Burst trade is a little bit weaker. That was when we last had the Warrior versus Devourer or Blood Razor, or whatever it's called, Blood Razor, could be talked about. They're not going to be there for sure, right? So I think Broken Blade pokes in. That part's fine. He gets Devourer off cooldown. But at this point, he rushes in because he has Bjergsen next to him, Smoothie coming up. And I think pro players can be guilty of this sometimes. It is, I can dive in, and I'm going to have Zillion revive, and Smoothie's in a good spot to flank. I'm sure Smoothie, who's someone's comms I've heard many times, given that I helped C9 at the time choose between Smoothie and Bunny Fufu for who should be starting support a few years ago. He's very active in comms. He's very much, I can do this, I can do this. And that can be very useful at times, but he's very talkative. You're no doubt empowered here. You're the young player. You're getting the calls that you can make a play. Bjergsen's already in position for you here. That's what's happening in this spot, but you're not saying, unfortunately, what can the enemy do? Vlad, for example, has a great TP ward to get involved here. And you know for sure Sven and Arcadian can't be here. So they dive in, they go super duper deep. DL disengage off the Zillion ult, that means he's out. And Broken Blade, who amusingly has, delayed damage, guarantees delayed damage on him. So Impact actually gets a kill. Now he gives up minion waves to do this, but he gets a kill. And then Bjergsen's overextended. Like, this is for sure a fall down in comms. This might be because this was a Broken Blade-led play, or there was just no loud voice saying an update on where the teammates are at. But Sven and Arcadian are very out of position to be making that dive in. And it's the first time they've actually been called on a bluff. Like, previously, TSM, like we mentioned, could go anywhere they want and do whatever they want. But this is a play where it's half thought through. And they've made some really smart plays before here, but this is a half thought through play. It is fine until now. This is where you stop with the play, but they pick up the bomb from Bjergsen. Smoothie comes in from a flank, and they say, we can punish them. Unfortunately, like, watch the minimap. Kindred finishes Gromp, and Lucian doesn't even get to his first jungle camp. Like, there was never going to be enough members here. So it was, yeah, that was very poorly played from the side of TSM. Something to learn from. And we did mention that when TSM had their last draft, where they had the early power spike draft against C9 and couldn't get enough in the mid game, that they needed to adjust some of their mid game decisions, there's one that needs to be adjusted, for sure. TSM still feels strong when they're grouping, and now they've got the preferential lane assignment. Vlad wasn't able to pick up CS, but has a kill. But Akali is pushing with TP advantage, and TSM invading as a team. They've got their utility and their strength with them, so this is not a game-losing play from TSM. It needs to be that kind of 2 times more over after the good early game. But, yeah, that's what we're inspecting right now, is how TSM can once again make it about their offensive tools and wait at face check out, and this is the way you do it. 4 control wards around Baron and a TP advantage. And now something's got to give on face checkers that don't have flash. So nicely done from TSM to kind of, you're getting a similar game state to what was there before, i.e. when you kind of had the implied lead everywhere. Now you just have a true lead from control wards and grouping. And this is the map view from the side of TL. As you can see, they know very little. And Jarvan can walk up and flag. Core JJ can walk up and die. They don't really have much ways to face check. Only really Xmithy, who's a level behind Arcadian. So they're trying to fight for it as safely and respectfully as possible. This is actually the terrain where Xmithy's Rek'Sai was caught in a previous game, but this is not that kind of reset, so he's going to be able to find some control wards to clear out. If you're wondering about where the scaling is at, I think Orianna is strong without being kind of exploding anyone. I think it's important to talk about how Varus in an extended fight will do a lot of damage, but he has a Rage Blade build, and the problem with that in this game is that Akali Kindred, especially Akali with Zillion, can dive in there, and the chances that Double F will be able to stack his Rage Blade and do damage here means that it's not the same 2-item power spike Varus in the meta where this was the meta build. If you think back to when Varus was really big, we had much more tanks going on, And in tanky fights, you always just hit a meat shield to get your Rage Blade online and then do a lot of damage from Varus. And there weren't a lot of Assassins either, right? But now Assassins are there and Varus might actually struggle with gap close and being able to stack up his damage. Orianna gets better at 3-4 items. Vladimir is kind of dreaming about his second item. So TL don't have Teamfight Wombo ready. Meanwhile, TSM have all their early game cores done. So because of that, TL kind of needs an extended invitation to get going. They need to warm up, right? They're cold at the moment. They need to warm up in terms of getting auto attacks up on the Varus before they're actually going to be able to pull off fights, and they don't have their items that give them the tipping points that come later. So watching Broken Blade come over the wall. So how'd this play start? Slow it down. Talk about how this play started. So Akali pulls back and starts roaming up early. Before Vladimir can walk up, they can only control one side, and they, as we know, they don't put coverage around his side. So Akali is just here. TL's primary objective right now is, okay, we can't let them start the Barons. They're almost all playing top side. So for now, you probably still feel like you're in a pretty safe position, right? Double Lift is the furthest forward to help with wave clear, but he's got Core JJ in his pocket and Smithy there as well. Jensen's just trying to poke for vision. There's a blue ping on this, so they know that Broken Blade is possibly there, but he's super decisive. See, Broken Blade just pops over and is able to just have insane zone. And remember, this is the buff that Akali's Shroud gave, and the team fight buff that we talked about. We were talking about earlier in the stream, if you missed it, that Akali was direct buffed for team fight impact because she only has to leave the Shroud once and re-enter to get the full 3 seconds. It used to be 0.5 seconds per exit from the Shroud. But for the laning phase, doesn't have the heal anymore. And so Broken Blade just decisively comes in, pinged out, so they're not too surprised by that. Smoothie interrupts the Tahm Kench on the Devour. And you notice Impact kind of hesitates, right? Impact at this point, he doesn't have flash, so he's actually just kind of very weird positioning here. I assumed he had flash with where he's positioning, but Impact needs to impact this fight. I know that sounds awkward. Super quickly. And this just ends up being a really good collapse from Broken Blade. So this is, shout out to him. Spreading a lead is not the easiest thing to do as a laning focused player, but they get flanked by, of all people, a Shroud that actually ends up being the invitation there. They can chase down further kills. Impact gets nothing done and didn't have the items, right? Like, that's just the reality. But this is a great play to make when you have a TP advantage, because they didn't even need the TP to do it. They were just able to do it in good, honest roam timings. They take them down there. Again, when you think of Akali coming from below you, you don't see the play going that way, but they turned it into instant focus, instant devour, Smoothie with the hero knock-up. Really well played, actually, from the side of TSM. These are the sort of proactive moves they weren't able to make in their last series, but they're able to make it excellently here. They already had the control ward down, and TL lose their rights to the Baron. It's going to be free, right? Yeah, really, really well played by TSM. They can't be kited. It's Kindred Zillion, so the moment you get Devour down and knock up on Smoothie onto the enemy Tahm Kench, there's just no disengage in the fight. It's not possible. The Vlad doesn't have the damage to stop you, and he's there late. And you have Zillion movement speed, Kindred, and Akali, right? You're always going to be able to get them. Even Apologies to Lucian. He's super maneuverable as well. So I think really nicely played by TSM while they're still around their apex of power. Their items were strong. We know the enemy's items aren't relevant at that point either. Double Lift never gets warmed up because it's devoured. So remember what we were talking about when it comes to getting value out of a Varus there. And it's one of those reasons we see very little Varus, is that the moment we have Akali and increasingly Zed and other champions running around, like, Varus just doesn't get to dot his I's, cross his T's, and put out the damage he wants to. Like, it just doesn't come together in a way that works for Varus in the meta right now. And now, the map control that was always there from TSM allows them to push up. Orianna does an okay job at clearing waves. Vladimir does an okay job. Varus does an okay job. But, again, wave clear against Baron. And the ability to play 3 lanes is huge here from TSM. They have double teleport on their side. So, very easy to play this out. And it doesn't feel like there's enough power in any 2- or 3-man unit to punish in a side lane. Vlad doesn't have kill pressure on Zilean. He's too far. He does not far enough ahead in items. Akali needs to be outnumbered in the mid lane, and that means that top lane will go down just to the ranged auto attacker. So TSM playing 3 lanes, but in a game like this, remember they were caught out playing 3 lanes last time. They were playing 2 lanes though in that case. In that game, they had a lot of champions who weren't self-sufficient, right? Zoe can be dove on, Nico can be dove on, has a bit of an argument with her ult, but otherwise, they had a squishy lineup. Here, Akali plays a solo lane very safely, Zilean plays a solo lane very safely, and Sven has backup. Even though he's not the best sieging champion, he's the one with the 3. So lane assignment's a lot safer from the side of TSM. They're not allowing anyone to be just pincered, and TL know that if they make a mistake with an all-in here, they just straight up lose. So this is a textbook way to play out a 3-lane tempo draft with the Baron. Impact puts down his ult, but no synergy behind it, trying to just keep the turret up for as long as possible. Unfortunately for him, it's a good timing because Baron buff was about to run out. That's actually a good play by Impact. This looks like a bad play from Impact to ult at this point. But this is the last minion wave with Baron. So they would have communicated around here, around 15 seconds for Baron. It's actually a good time to ult because the enemy team disengaged because, you know, that ult still has threat behind it, and the next minion wave doesn't have Baron buffs. So actually, it does buy some time for this mid lane outer turret. It shouldn't die. So shout out to Impact. That was actually a good ult there, even though on first glance, it's, okay, well, no one's diving in with this ult. Why would you do it? That was a good time to ult because it guarantees you keep up a base turret. But then again, this is the kind of quandary, is that now Vlad has some items. Jarvan's pretty tanky. Orianna Shockwave does damage. But now you want a front-to-back team fight. You know, now you say, all right, this is what you drafted for, front-to-back team fighting. However, how are they ever, with no map control, ever going to get the fight that looks the way TL wants it to be? And by that I mean, you know, change the corruption on the front, EQ onto the 2 people, Vladimir comes in from a flank. Like, you need a lot of things to get the fight you want. You need warding on your flanks. You need a pretty good map position. You need a reason for the enemy to walk up or to have threat onto them, because you're not walking up to the enemy at all times, right? Like, at this late in the game, 28 minutes, like, you need reasons for a 5v5 fight to happen. They've already lost the Baron 1 time. They've already lost a base turret and lost an inhibitor. Setting up a map state where the enemy comes to you and then you get that first CC down, someone face checks and the face check chain happens, should be impossible, because TSM started with a tempo draft, had some smart moves, were able to snowball their lead with a smart pincer, had the first Baron, and should have all the stationary control vision maintained. TL never got to push out to clear any of that vision because they've never really controlled the map. We're seeing Impact take out a control ward in front of us. So given that, TL's wards will be shallow, TSM will be lying in wait, you know, ready to pounce. And thus, even now when the items are done, it feels like it's too late. Like, this is one of those drafts where you say, okay, TL's items are online, but actually wielding them seems really tricky. You got to deal with lane assignments, and this is where Vlad might be better. And we thought there was a time you'd be able to take over, but 2 levels down and 60 CS and a lot of gold. Again, those sort of predictions don't hold that much water. It's not 5-item Vladimir where it doesn't matter if the enemy has 6, your 5 are better because you're Vladimir. We're still at, you know, 2.5-item Vladimir. And I think in that case, the level lead from Broken Blade of 2 levels is big. There's no ability to get a fight around Baron because TSM have controlled this territory the entire time, and they do Baron super quickly. So all TL can do is move away, and this is where some Korean teams would just run at Baron and say, come to us. And that seems dumb, right? Because you're probably going to be on a ward. You're probably going to be in a position where you lose that Baron fight, you lose the game. But if you don't, the enemy just plays 3 lanes again and ends the game, and you never even get to fight with your items. At least if you start the Baron, the enemy comes to you, and, you know, it's more predictable to hit a line skill shot in the right direction. But instead, TL, they don't have the vision. They're behind in the tempo. They're not able to walk up, and it feels like a lot of this will be inevitable, right? Like, the push and pull here is going to be too much. They got Zilean's flash a second ago, but that's the most they're going to get. Now, minions are going to come with Baron buff in 2 lanes, and There's just nothing to do here when you're 10,000 gold behind and you never get to have a 5v5. Impact has to use a one-man Hema play to stop being turret dived. Like, none of this needs to be slowing down. It's just cleanup from the side of TSM. Now, not a lot of North American teams can pull off the draft we saw from TSM, but I think games like this should make TSM fans really confident that their analysts and their players are onto something. They're not a perfect team. You know, we saw some communication breakdown around the Broken Blade play up top, and I would definitely inspect the shot calling difference between the amazing Bjergsen back and TP timing to bot side that got them 2 kills on Varus and Tom Kench, and whatever communication kind of threw off the top lane play where they went in with no possibility of backup being in position. Like, those were on very different levels of execution. But in this particular game, overall, they're able to play a fast style. And, you know, if we got Golden Guardians playing the equivalent of, you know, Karthus mid lane all games, or in top lane, outscale, we got 3-4 Ornn items, let's win now. These are the drafts that punish those drafts. SK Telecom T1 is very good at playing drafts like this normally. Not so much in the Sandbox Game 1. We're going to go over that next game. But this is the sort of team comp that punishes how TL likes to play. That's the reality of it. They execute it really well in this particular game. Now, can they execute it in a best of 5? If they lost game 1 playing the strategy, do they return to it and feel confident in brushing it off with, you know, with a young voice in top side, and he's usually going to be one playing carries? I can't know that. You know, Arcadian and Broken Blade, after trying this style on a loss, can they bounce back and play it again? Bounce back and play it again? I don't know the answer to that. But the best of TSM here, I think, because of where the meta is, beats the best of TL trying a strategy like this. And I do wonder on 9.6, do they just abandon Vladimir? Do they, you know, just pick a Sion and try to salvage it? I think Sion, in this game, for example, I can't remember if it was banned or not, but I think Sion would actually have been, if they're going to abandon top lane, Sion is the way better pick than Vladimir. Like, they picked Vlad, who already lost the lane in the early mid game, and then gave him nothing, and then they got nothing out of him. Now, if you're going to pick Sion, you can give him nothing, and he can get into team fights, which is the Griffin way in many moons, and maybe you just try to replace it with Urgot on 9.6. But I think TL, with this draft, went ultra scaling, and then didn't really have a map plan to keep that scaling going, and actually have 3 lanes being able to play their lanes like they needed to. It was always going to be hard because the enemy team has a great turret dive with Zilean Kindred, but they never even needed the Zilean for turret dives. It was a Zilean teleport flank of all things. Could have been Lissandra in the same play, just happened to be Zilean. So I think at the end of the day, TL had a confused approach to this game if they were going to give Impact nothing, which is kind of their way to go. And I hope they don't just try to do this in playoffs and give him, say, Gnar in a bad matchup or Gnar blind and then get counterpicked, because the carries exist that didn't in the top die meta that Impact was able to make things work in 2016 to punish a Gnar in that scenario or Vladimir in this scenario. And so, yeah, after being very convinced by TL last week, I feel like a lot of TL is revealed in the draft. I feel like if their draft is smart and snappy, they should be in a really confident position in order to take down wins. I think if their draft is a bit muddied like this one, I think they're going to be a bit off the pace. So I don't look at this game and say TL's trolling, because I think they didn't make any hugely bad mistakes. I think the more apparent mistakes were on the side of TSM. You know, the bigger mistake was that play around top side. However, I think they didn't play to their strengths, and I don't know if they really learned anything from this, because my analysis on what TL is and isn't doesn't change at all. They're just, the win-loss column changes. So